Yes, and we're live. So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul Adepoji, and I'm the community manager for the International Center for Journalists Pamela Howard Forum on Global Crisis Reporting. The 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, may come to an end this weekend, but climate-related crises remain everyday realities for many. In Africa, hundreds of people have died this year alone, and millions have also been displaced due to deadly floods this year. And even worse, 1 in 3 citizens on the continent is affected by water scarcity. On today's webinar, I am hosting experts from the African Water Facility, AWF, which is an initiative of the African Ministers' Council on Water that is managed by the African Development Bank, AFDB. So join me in welcoming AWF's coordinator, Mchera Chirwa. How are you doing, Mchera?
Very well, Paul, and delighted to be here, and greetings to all the participants.
Yes, thank you very much. And we're also joined by Water Resources and Climate Change Technical Advisor to AWF, Elikad Nyabia. How are you doing, Elikad?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here, and thanks for people joining in.
Yes, so thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And proud to be becoming AWF's coordinator. Chira worked at the FDB for over 12 years, managing regional infrastructure development projects in Southern and Eastern Africa. He was also the Chief Infrastructure and Public-Private Partnership Specialist in AFDB's Infrastructure and Urban Development Department. Nyabia, on the other hand, has 25 years of multi-sectoral experience working in climate resilience, water resource management, and institutional capacity building. In his current role at AWF, he provides technical guidance and management support, specializing in water sanitation and hygiene wash programming, in addition to climate resilience. And so to help journalists to better understand and report on Africa's water crisis, today we will discuss water project preparation and financing, the impacts of climate change on water and sanitation, climate mitigation and adaptation as a response to water security, and more. We will also examine gains or lack thereof for Africa from COP27. And we are being joined by journalists on different platforms. So let me start by welcoming those that are joining us on the Zoom platform. As usual, we are always interested in knowing where you are joining us from today. So if we can go to the chat box, if the chat box is open, to tell us where you are joining us from today, we really appreciate it. And if you're watching this live stream on Facebook, we would also like to know where you are joining us from. So look at the comment box under the video that you are watching and actively engage with us. In the days leading up to this discussion, I was approached. I got a message from some journalists that said we're actually specifically working on stories on these issues. So if you have any questions, particularly in relation to the subject of discussion today that you will be interested in having us talk on today, please do not wait until the end of the session. Instead, I encourage you to directly reach out through the Q&A option on the Zoom platform or the comments box on the Facebook live stream video that you are watching. And that done, the best way for me to open this conversation is to connect it to something that we've been doing over the past 2 weeks, which is talking about climate change in the context of COP27. And quick, from a personal perspective, last week, I personally published a story that put the focus on the severity of Africa's 2022 flood. In Nigeria, we've seen lots of displacement, but you agree with me that flood is not something that is peculiar to Nigeria or African countries alone. So let's start from that by trying to connect Africa's water crisis and mainstreaming it into the deliberations at COP27. So what is the connection between water crisis and why is it a major topic at a major climate change conference? Who wants to open the floor on that?
All right, I'll make a start. And thanks once again, Paul, for this opportunity. And we're delighted to be here. Indeed, as you rightly say, Africa is a continent that has significant water challenges. We already know that. Only 68% of the population estimated has an access to sustainable water supply, and only 40% with access to sanitation. A lot of our people, still lack basic access to water and sanitation. And we are also aware that investment levels over the past few years have not matched up to the demand to be able to close the gap in providing access, let alone to achieve the SDG targets by 2030. It is actually estimated that we will not be able to achieve those targets. Now, as we are battling to scale up investment to provide services, not just for domestic use of water, but for all other uses, be it agricultural use, water for energy, for industrialization, and so on, which requires huge investments, we now have the climate impact hitting on us. I think we're all aware that Africa is the worst affected part of the world with climate impact. The floods that you referred to hitting Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, in the Central Africa region this year, but also flooding that has happened in other parts of the continent over the past year or two. I recall the cyclones that hit the East African coast, Madagascar, Mozambique, Malawi, South Africa, heavily impacted. What does that do? It damages existing infrastructure, as we know, leaving large parts of the continent or large parts of those areas inundated, with limiting access to what's already existing. But it also means that once the floods recede, governments have to invest in rebuilding and fixing what's been damaged, which then diverts resources from going towards those that are yet unserved, towards fixing what's already, what was there but has been damaged. So the impact is huge. And for us working in the water sector, it makes our task even harder. And therefore we need to find solutions that will, respond or react to these realities. So that would be my first kind of response to that. I hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't, to bring in Harika, let's look at, to me and probably to many other people on this call, water crisis may seem like a simple problem to solve. And I'm really happy it stopped from the angle of, from the solutions perspective. But we know that water, especially in some countries, are abundant, and they actually are available in too much abundance, which I think is a crisis on its own, while in some places it's actually not available at all. And so let's look at how did something that, if is well managed, could actually go around to everybody, how did it still become a major global crisis that a significant proportion of the world? For instance, 1 in 3 countries in Africa, 1 in 3 persons in Africa is still threatened by. How do you balance this? Something that seems so simple is still a major global crisis?
Okay, thank you, Paul. And maybe before I answer the question, allow me try to connect climate change, water and water crisis, especially in the context. First of all, maybe most people are aware that climate change alters the water cycle. That's the biggest change, actually. So in doing so, actually climate change has altered the water cycle in terms of creating climate hazards, which have changed in terms of frequency, intensity, and affecting the quality and quantity of the water resources on the continent. And from statistics, almost 70% of climate disasters are water-related. And here, when we talk about water-related disasters, we talk about floods, as we mentioned in Nigeria, even in South Sudan in the last few years, prolonged drought, in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa, heat waves in the Horn of Africa, and sea water rises and tsunami. So how did this one happen? How did it come, and what can we do to alleviate this situation? First of all, it is very, very important that we focus on reducing the vulnerability of the people. Here, I mean looking at exposure because of the climate change hazards, looking at managing structural inequalities, and also minimizing impacts of water scarcity, creating displacements over water scarcity. The other aspect, which is very important, is that we need to manage our water resources in a holistic manner. Looking at integrated water resources management, here I mean looking at basin or catchment level, looking at water needs for different uses, water, agriculture, hydropower, and of course the environment ecosystem. The other aspect I would like to raise, which is very, very important, is that in this crisis in the continent, the need for managing water resources at basin level is more important than ever before. Of course, you know, most of the African water resources are transboundary in nature, whether it's surface or groundwater resources. And, you know, countries manage water resources within the boundaries. But it is very important that we manage water resources in a holistic manner, and actually looking at not at the volumes of water that pass through our territories, but looking at shared benefits. Here, for example, I'll refer to Nigeria. For example, you need storage dams to minimize the flood. Those storage dams could be created upstream. They can suffice in terms of regulating the flows of the river, produce hydropower, which can be transmitted to Nigeria for support and other countries, but also increase agriculture and also increase tourism and other aspects. So we need to get out of the box of national planning, but look at holistic catchment basin level planning. So briefly, in short, that's what I could say. Maybe I wait for other questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think you really mentioned the importance of probably seeing it from a cross-border collaboration perspective. Now, how is this currently playing out? What are the options that are currently on the table, and what progress? Which ones are we seeing green lights, and which ones do you think, nah, this is not going anywhere? Who wants to take that?
Well, I can make a start. There's a lot of collaboration going on, but we always say more needs to be done or more can be done. We have a number of river basin organizations that are operating in Africa, notably the Nile Basin, in the East Africa region. We have the Lake Chad Basin, Volta, the Zambezi Basin. So all these have some institutional arrangements and forms of cooperation between the countries to manage jointly the development of water resources and protection and access. So there is frameworks in place to cooperate. However, it is not easier than planning and developing resources at national level, which requires just a decision at the country level, mobilization of resources, and going ahead at boundary level or multinational level. It needs cooperation across different countries, and priorities differ, as we know. Countries may sit around a table cooperating on a transboundary resource, but each country has got its national development plans. Each government is elected on an agenda which they want to deliver, and sometimes the two do not talk to each other. Our role really as a water facility and the African Development Bank is to try and support such initiatives, and we do that. We provide resources to help build institutional capacity. We provide resources to enable technical capacity, to enable dialogue, to provide master planning, to help these countries to develop investment programs that will help to address the challenges that are facing. But it takes time. It takes time and a lot of effort to cooperate and agree. As we are all aware, there are some disputes that are notable on some transboundary basins that governments and partners are trying to help our countries to resolve. So when you have disagreements, it's very difficult to move forward at the pace that we need. But our hope is that ultimately we see the importance of cooperation as opposed to pursuing particular interests, because the climate impact that we're talking about is upon us and will not wait for us to agree. We need to find solutions.
Yes, one of the things we usually do during our webinars is we always like giving the floor to journalists that want to ask their questions live. So if you have any burning question that you have, the best way for me to get you on the platform is to just raise your hand, and we'll do it from here. So if you have any direct question that you would like to ask live, please indicate by raising your hand, and we'll give you the platform. And I also want to welcome participants that are also joining us through invitation from other programs outside International Center for Journalists. Thank you very much for joining us. And we can also see representation from a lot of African countries. Thank you very much for joining us today. And you mentioned something about the processes of working with water resources that are cross-border in nature. And it's really something, cross-border collaboration and implications for cross-border issues are actually at the core of many, not just water issues, but general issues generally in African countries regarding getting African countries to work together. So if I take you out a little bit from water crisis and support what I'm trying to say by looking at the collaboration that African countries had to do during the COVID-19 response, we see them intentionally and aggressively working together. In the twinkle of an eye, we saw countries coming together to develop plans and to also talk to international bodies. So which means that this level of collaboration and understanding and prioritization and working together, getting things done much more quickly is actually feasible. And but why are we not seeing this expedited action in working together in addressing the continent's water issues? I'll go to Elifad. Ellie, that's your question. Oh, I think he's frozen. Michelle, do you want to start?
Yes, it looks frozen. Maybe it's a connection. It should rejoin. Indeed, I think it's really a good lesson that we need to learn from. I mean, the cooperation that our countries showed during, as the example you gave, the COVID pandemic. It was a common problem for which we needed to find common solutions, and cooperation was easier. Here, we're talking about shared resources. Resources that are shared amongst countries, the same resource that each one wants to develop. Sometimes it's really the challenge of understanding how cooperation would provide a win-win solution to all the countries involved in developing the resource. I think what is key is to demonstrate common benefits as opposed to singular benefits. I think there's need for more dialogue to see how a resource can be shared effectively without hampering the interests of the others. I think it's really about joint planning, sitting around a table and looking at the longer term benefits of cooperation, because in any case, without that cooperation, that resource could dwindle and be lost to all, which would even have a more serious impact. I think Elikat is back. I don't know, Elikat, did you hear the question? Would you like to add to that?
No, it looks frozen to me. It looks frozen again. So let's talk about WASH. There is a work issue there's something about WASH I think we need to talk about. When you look at WASH, when I was a couple of years ago, there was this major announcement and launch of WASH initiative in Nigeria that, okay, by so and more, in a couple of years, probably was it 20? I'm not sure about the target Nigeria set, that it was going to achieve the global watch goals. And I think India was the country then that everybody was hailing as being few months away from watch goals. But all of a sudden, now we are not hearing much about it again. So let's talk about these watch goals. Why do you think African countries, or let me say, from my perspective, seems to be struggling in sustaining the tempo of their WASH projects?
No, I think I would say there are various reasons for that. Because mind you, if we're talking about a national level program to achieve certain WASH goals, first you need a policy pronouncement, then you need to develop the program, then you need to finance it, and then implement it, and monitor the delivery of that. So what we've seen over the past few years is that most African countries have tended to focus on large infrastructure investments, energy sector projects, renewable energy, road networks, railways, at the expense of also certain other sectors, such as water and sanitation. We see that there isn't as much focus and investment in the water and sanitation sector as compared to energy and transport, for example. So although you can set targets, the idea is to actually deliver on those targets by putting investments. The second element is really the readiness of investment projects, because for money to flow to deliver an asset that will provide access to water and sanitation, we need to have good projects, well-prepared projects, well-structured projects that are bankable, as we would say, that would attract financing. And this is, in a way, the role we play as the African Water Facility, because our main objective, one of our main areas of operation, is to help develop and prepare good quality projects that will attract downstream financing. So that is the issue. So if a country sets targets to achieve WASH goals, how good is the investment program that they have put in place, and how committed are they to put resources to achieve the delivery of that program, and have projects that are attractive to financiers, be it public sector, governments themselves, multilateral financing institutions like the African Development Bank, and other bilaterals, but also private sector, because in the development finance area, we always say that the public sector will not achieve the investment levels that we require without bringing on board the private sector. So how conducive do we have in the investment program modalities that will attract private investors? So it's all these elements put together. I could talk more, but let me stop there.
I think Helkal is back. Do you have any addition to the conversation that we've been having so far? You were frozen a little bit.
Yeah, I think my climate change affected my internet connection, so I missed the question.
Yeah, I think we're talking about getting African countries to work together. We've seen them working together during the COVID, but why are they reluctant to prioritize urgently responding to this? Then we also mentioned the WASH goals, why African countries are struggling to meet these WASH goals, that they pumped champagne when they were announcing that they want to set these goals. But all of a sudden, the tempo died down in some African countries that have already made some ambitious pronouncements. So what are your thoughts on these two issues?
Okay, let me add some contribution to what my colleague has mentioned. Transborder collaboration, both for surface and groundwater, is not a very simple issue. As my colleague mentioned, there are some basins where there is good progress. I think like Niger Basin, they do plan together and develop infrastructure together. But there are some other basins where it is a bit complex, maybe from way back from the political connections and rights over water. But that's not lost. I would like to bring another dimension. Despite those challenges, we can still do a lot support climate adaptation and resilience at country level, looking at projects to implement at national level. So it will be a great process to bring collaboration on board of everybody. But for now, I think the thrust should be at the projects we do deliver on the ground, whether it is water or transport, whatever, should be resilient and supporting climate change. And when we talk about a project which is resilient in the context of water, we might look at how do you manage water resource and ecosystem? How do you look at the infrastructure capability to withstand stress and shock? For example, it's a flood or heat wave. How do they manage through those climate hazards? And then also looking at systems. Systems here, I mean policies, strategies, management, and efficiency supporting climate action. And the other two important aspects we need to look at is people who manage the systems and the communities. They must be supported. They're aware about the climate science and adaptation actions. And last but not least, we need to look at the institutions that support the water infrastructure, looking at the governance, looking at sectoral coordination in terms of planning for the water resource. So through that way, then we're able to build a project that is resilient, that can have less impacts downstream or even across the sectors, and be able to withstand during the strong shocks from climate change.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response. We have two participants that would like to ask questions live. Ronald, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Paul, for hosting us and for bringing those two gentlemen on board. Once again, my name is Ronald Mustoke. I'm a journalist. I'm based in Kampala. I write for the Independent magazine. It's a print and online publication. Now, I have two short ones. The first one is about investments in the water sector, continent-wise. I think one of the issues which have come out at the ongoing COP27 in Egypt has been to the effect that the investments seem to be lagging behind. Investments in the water sector seem to be lagging behind by several $1 billion. I think they mentioned some good amount of money. But my question to maybe the two gentlemen is, for them to paint for me a scenario, what would happen if these investments continue lagging behind over the next decade? Generally, just to give me a picture of the continent, what might happen. And then secondly, it's about underground water resources. Mr. I think that was Mr. Chirwa, I think so. He just talked about bankable water projects, yeah, that these need to be attractive. And I was wondering, what sort of, how attractive would an underground project have to be for it to be funded by his organization? Thank you so much.
Patrick, do you want to go back to back with your question? Okay, answer that question, then we'll come back to Patrick.
All right. Thank you very much, Ronald, for those two questions. So indeed, the investment levels that we have so far in Africa will not help us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, as an example. So they are falling way behind. In fact, just to give you a picture, in order to achieve the SDG targets by 2030, the current investment rate to achieve safely managed drinking water would have to increase 12-fold. To be able to achieve safely managed sanitation targets would have to increase the investment rates by 20 times. And to achieve basic hygiene, services would have to increase investment rates by 42 times. These are huge amounts. And so the question is, what will happen? The question is, we'll continue to lag behind. It's as simple as that. We'll continue to lag behind, but the situation will get worse because one, we have a rapid population increase, as we know. Africa is the fastest growing region in the world. Currently, just over an estimated 1.3 billion inhabitants. By 2050, we expect it to double that. So if we are not meeting targets now, what will happen in 2050 at the current investment rate? So this is not something to take lightly. It's something that we need the message to go out to our leadership and focus more investments to be able to meet this. The second approach is the support that development partners such as ourselves, the African Development Bank, are doing to try and bring on board other innovative ways to finance these investments. So besides looking at only public sector and traditional ways of financing infrastructure or investments such as this, we are looking to support more innovative ways of perhaps bringing in more private sector participation where viable, bringing in small scale, even medium scale, service providers in some of our urban cities, areas, in countries where this is acceptable, building their capacity, providing them with training to be able to scale up, because in that way we can reach more people in a shorter time. So by channeling financing and support towards that. So that's a risk we face if we do not scale up. On the second question, which is about groundwater resources and how what would need to be done to ensure such an investment is viable. It's the same approach, I would say, Ronald, because first of all you have to study to do a good analytical studies on the investment potential of groundwater. How big is the resource? How sustainable is it? Of what quality is it? And how, because if you have to keep pumping out, how regularly or how effectively does the aquifer recharge over time? And what would be the impact to the environment, to other users of the same aquifer? Because as you know, a lot of the groundwater resources are shared even across different borders. We see borders on the surface, but these water resources are spanning different territories. So if you pump in one location, it obviously impacts perhaps another location. So this kind of analysis will inform us what is feasible, and therefore what technology is required to invest. Is it economically viable? Is it sustainable? And it's the same analysis we do even for surface water resources. So a well undertaken feasibility study, looking at the various options, and then a solution recommended for investment, with a sustainable lifespan, would make it attractive for investment. So that would be my response to the two. My colleague might want to add to that. Elikat.
Yeah, allow me add on the question that what would happen if the investment lagged behind, and I would like to bring another angle. If the investment in water would remain behind, as my colleague mentioned, the population will continue growing, climate change are increasing, would see a lot of fights over rights for water because there is competition, and would see a lot of displacements and migration, people migrating from where there is scarce water resources to urban centers and even going abroad. So we could see a lot of conflicts, because water is very scarce and is being impacted by climate change, and the investment is less. So we would see increased conflict, and nobody wants conflict. On the second part, on the groundwater resources, I must say that for the drought-prone areas, especially the Sahel and Somalia, most of the cases, the surface resources are limited. So even part of Somalia and Somalian region. So it is very important that if you can identify a reliable groundwater deep aquifer that can sustain and meet the demand for the population, well and good. But this one requires high tech. So bringing innovation, technology, remote sensing, to ensure that you identify resilient groundwater resources. And the skills in some countries is limited. So it requires also that you equip and capacitate the countries to be able to manage and identify potential resilient groundwater resources. Those are my additions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Patrick, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask a question when Mr. Chirwa was saying they are helping some other African countries, and they are doing some initiative. They are communicating with the government of African countries. So my question is, how many countries did they help so far? Or how many countries are they still in communications with the government so that they will suppress this water crisis?
All right. Paul, can I respond?
Oh yeah, you can address that right away.
Okay, thanks. Patrick, it is all of them. I can tell you, for example, the Africa Water Facility has been in existence since 2004. We have mobilized, and just to tell you a little bit more about this facility, it is set up to scale up investment in water and sanitation in Africa by supporting the development of good projects, getting them prepared and ready for financing. That's what we do as a first step. We have other priorities as well around improving governance, institutional capacity, and promoting investments for projects that are ready. But since establishment, which is just over 15 years ago, the African Water Facility has supported projects in 52 countries in Africa. So some are completed, some are ongoing, and every year we have more projects. So we do not segregate. Every country is eligible to apply to the facility for support, to help develop projects, to help build capacity, or to provide technical assistance. We receive requests, we evaluate them. We have a strategy which has pillars. So we look at the request and see how it matches our strategy of what we want to support over that period. And if it is matched, that project is eligible for support. And then we look at what resources we have to commit in a particular planning cycle, which is annual. And then based on that, we identify projects. So basically all the countries are being supported. Similarly, in our host institution, which is the African Development Bank, we have operations in almost all the countries in Africa. So this is ongoing. All we ask all the time when we talk to our member countries is bring us good projects. Show us what these projects will do in terms of improving access, how many people will benefit, what are the impacts on the environment, how can we mitigate these elements. Once assessed, then the project, it's a good project, we will support it. And let me also say that this is also, thanks to our donors and partners who are providing some of the grants that we channel towards this project. Back to you, Paul.
Yes, thank you very much. So we have a number of questions already that we have to answer. Hopefully we can get to as much as we can. So Solomon would like to know, how can we explain the phenomenon that most countries are surrounded by water, but the people usually face water shortages at homes? Harry, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. People are surrounded by water, but they have shortage at home. Of course, I would like to say that, of course, there is a gap between demand and supply. The knowledge, I would say partly it's a knowledge gap. And to address that, I think the governments have to come in. A river might be passing through here, but if it's not well tapped, for example, using rainwater harvesting as a simple technology to tap water, most of the villages you go there, it is raining, and after it has rained, they go down to the well to pick the water. So in my view, there is a knowledge gap that the governments need to work on and support their communities to ensure that we sustain water household level. That's one aspect. The other aspect, we need to, when we are planning water, we need to look at the different uses, because the population requires water for different purposes, for drinking, for agriculture, for animals. Yeah, so sometimes the cost of bringing water from where it is capital intensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it requires that you have to come in with the financial muscle and the countries, and of course, looking at how these systems can be sustained. So it's an issue of gap and the needs, but also need for planning, and also the issue of also financing is also a factor. If you don't have money, you cannot invest. Some of the projects require real high capital intensity. There is no river passing here, but people are not getting water. So that's my on this question.
Yes, thank you very much. We have another. Sorry, please. Can you mute your mic, Patrick? Thank you. We have another question from Callistus. Callistus would like to know. Let me see. Callistus would like to know, where are other transboundary conflict hotspots in Africa? Coming from Botswana, I know there has been conflicts between Namibia and Botswana, where fishermen suspected to be fishermen have been killed by state along the Chobe River. Do we have similar incidents in other countries where shared water transboundary is marred with conflict? This is only noticeable within the tripartite Okavango River Basin shared water resources. What's your quick response to that?
Maybe let me take that one. Of course, yes. We have other examples where there is a transboundary conflict. An example I would highlight is Lake Edward and Albert, which is shared between Uganda and Congo. Of course, DRC, they have the different fishing regime, whereas Uganda is fishing differently. So there is fisheries depletion and also management of water sources different. So there are always frequent fights on that lake. You know? Ugandan troops firing at DRC troops and also vice versa. But if the resource is not well managed, the two countries coming together, you see escalation in this conflict. So people need to understand how to manage the resource very well, agree on the fishing regime and the nets to use in this particular case, agree on managing the water resource. So transboundary collaboration in terms of cooperation and managing the resource in terms of planning and management is very, very key to minimize such conflicts on rights and use of different users.
Yes, so let's go back to talking about wash issues. I have a question on wash issues, which is while climate change is doing its own, while we are seeing record number of floods, we are still seeing the aggressive resurgence of some waterborne outbreaks. And we can see the implications of all this all around us. I would like to know if you have any thoughts on why this is happening, on why countries need to still prioritize these issues, and how can they channel their strategies so that they are not utilizing their limited resources on one when they can utilize that same resource to achieve lots of goals at the same time.
So sorry, Paul, I missed the first part of your question.
So the question is, we are seeing water-associated waterborne diseases, also emerging, especially aggressively. I know Africa CDC announces a number of cholera outbreaks in many African countries. So with countries having to respond to these and still respond to other water-associated crises elsewhere, how can they better channel their limited resources and still get the best results of such investments?
It's an issue of, I would say, continued civic education for hygiene. I think people still need to learn, to be educated, to be made aware of the risks. I mean, I was listening to a conversation recently that during the COVID pandemic, everybody was washing hands several times a day. Are we doing the same now that the COVID pandemic has, incidence has waned in our countries? This is something that we need to continue. Hygiene is a way of life. That's one reason. The second reason I would say is that, there's more pollution happening in our water sources. It's a fact, and caused by various reasons, including competing uses, lack of regulatory frameworks to police, contamination of sources. This is also a source of waterborne infections. These viruses and bacteria are evolving as well. They are also, changing their way of entering, our spaces, and also becoming more resilient. to previous treatment. So it's a whole myriad of issues, I think. But the key is to continue the message to our countries that we need to continue investing more in sustainable, clean water resources, and also continue educating our populations on the risks, as well as the importance of having clean environments and hygienic way of utilizing resources. I would say those are the two approaches.
Yeah, so let's talk about I don't know whether there are any what do you consider the best approach for the international community seeking to engage in Africa, and do you talk about focus on especially on those that are interested in water related issues? And because sometimes when you see what different initiatives are bringing on board, sometimes you see duplication of efforts,
yep.
And sometimes you see even though you are not a water expert, you can even begin to ask yourself, does this approach even have any positive prospect? So how can the international community actively engage in Africa's water landscape? And are you seeing any of the discussions happening at COP? Are there any prospects for Africa's water issues that you think is worthy of further pursuing?
Eli, you wanna have a first?
Yes, let me take this one. I think in my perspective, I think I see the international community supporting the water sector, and for the need to increase coordination, both at, for example, if I'm implementing in a town, there must be a master plan for the town, and the interventions in that town needs to be coordinated by different support from different angles. So it is very important that the support we get from the international community is coordinated but guided by the master planning, either at seated type or at basin level. So without proper coordination, you will see missing gaps here and there. But I would also like to mention that even when we are doing the planning, let's do it holistic manner. You can provide water, but if you don't provide water to the vulnerable needed in the rural shanty communities, you will still have effects of water like COVID and cholera. So looking also at environment, looking at solid waste, fecal sludge, in most of the African countries, we have a lot of issues to deal with fecal sludge and solid waste management and environment pollution that actually affect the whole essence of providing water for safe hygiene and safe drinking. Ultimately, affects the quality of the water, which is affecting the population. So it is important that the international community comes together, works through a framework which is coordinated, of course, at the regional country level, guided by the master planning by the country or by sub-basin.
Yeah, what about the aspect of is there any water associated priorities at COP that you think is promising that you may be aware of? Or have you not heard anything promising for Africa's water issues so far?
Well, I would say the focus obviously at COP is to address the climate challenges, and water has a role to play. There are new investment funds that have been announced, addressing new resources, to support climate mitigation and adaptation. And obviously, at the level of the African Development Bank, where we are, there are a number of agreements that have been signed and announced, some of which will obviously benefit the water sector. But it's a competing resource, obviously not only focused on the water sector. If we talk climate, it's almost in all the sectors. So I would say, what's important for the sector is our preparedness as a water sector. How well prepared are we at a country level? How good are our national plans? How are we prioritizing investments that will help to address impact and therefore be able to tap into these resources? So that's really what I would say. But I think resources are there. What we need to do is demonstrate our readiness and have projects that are ready to attract investment. And really, in a way, that's the role we play also at the Africa Water Facility to help, link good projects to investment and get the projects ready for that.
Yeah, you're addressing journalists now. So this is an opportunity. What do you think probably journalists, what are your advice for journalists regarding the water crisis landscape? What are you seeing in the reportage that you think needs better improvement? Or what are issues that you think they are not focusing on that ought to be given attention? So I'll start with Ellie. I'll come back to Chira. So Ellie, you have the floor.
Yeah,
journalists.
Yeah, I think the message we give to journalists is to increase advocacy on the need to use water as a tool to support climate adaptation. So as you might have seen, the focus on the COP27 is that we need to have action support water adaptation and resilience. So the journalist needs to have this message very clear and be able to disseminate and advocate for this, that because they contribute to social mobilization. So they need to communicate the message very clearly, and so that we can have more financing coming to the sector and also leveraging on partnerships.
What do you think?
To add to that, I would say we need to have more demonstration of examples where success has happened and where the challenges are. We need to, as journalists, I would like to see more advocacy on the why water should be prioritized. It cuts across all development areas in a country. It impacts health, it impacts the economy. It's not just water for water. I think we need to put the message out there more so that governments note the importance of prioritizing the sector, putting resources into the sector, and undertaking reforms that will ensure that more people have access to water. I think that's a message that we need to take out there.
Okay, I think that is fair enough. I think that is also well taken. So we know COP will finish. The attention is getting, the explanations, everything will finish in a couple of days. And but for you and your team members, addressing this water issue is a consistent topic that you wake up to every day. So how do you think this momentum, the withering of this momentum, can still be sustained? Because if we take a look at the coverage around climate change, initially started at the world, calling attention to how aggressive and how urgent the climate crisis would be. But it seems as if the general public is already used to that kind of reporting, that may not be able to get the same kind of results that it's used to. And that sometimes makes it look as if the world is not even taking climate change seriously. Now, how do we avoid that with the water crisis and still convince the people that this is a relevant issue to keep on to? I think this is a major concern for my journalists. So how can you help us at Water Crisis Experts to be able to avoid being unnecessarily contributing to the general public not taking these issues serious, because there is nothing new to exclaim or warn us about? Ellie?
I think from my perspective is that we need to continue engaging from the COP decisions, both because everybody's going back to their own country, but keep engaging at country level and even at regional level. There are regional institutions that, for example, like AMCAO and others, which support these initiatives to maintain the thrust. I see that at COP27, they are proposing also to have like action for water adaptation and resilience, which is like more or less a tool that will support, I would say, continental or regional early warning systems, support disaster prediction and early warning systems. So I think it's very important that we continue engaging at country level, continue engaging at regional level, but also involve research so that we can share where climate adaptation and mitigation has actually helped, so that we're able to scale up and be able to get it to other locations. So this is my view. I think we need to maintain that moment.
Yeah, so we have 3 minutes to the end of it, and I want to take it this way: 1 minute for each person, and the last minute for me. So what are your last remarks, or what are your parting shots, and what do you think the take-home message for you to our journalists should be? I'll start with anybody that wants to start. Who wants to start first?
Okay, I can make a start. I think the takeaway message is that, well, I'll speak from the Africa Water Facility. I think we are a facility accessible to all the African countries to help support development of the water sector. The water sector needs to be prioritized. We can see already the impact that the climate is having. Doing nothing is not a solution. We can support development of good projects and channeling investment to the sector. But we need collaboration with the countries and identification of the priority areas that we should support investments in. So I think that's really the message. We're going out there to help work with countries to implement the actions coming out of COP, but also actions in the national development plans to enhance access. We need to see more water having, more people having access to good quality water and sanitation over the long term, and planning is key for
that. On my part, the general is that water has cascading effects in terms of climate change to other sectors like agriculture, energy, food, and ecosystem. So I'm asking the journalists really to take this message wherever they are operating, in whatever publications they're producing, to advocate for water as a driver for climate adaptation and increasing investments in water sector. That's my key messages and last words.
Yes, thank you very much. I know we had lots of questions that we couldn't get to. So, but please, if you are working on any story on that you think these experts would be great sources for, I'm more than willing to help you out in getting comments and feedbacks from them. And so please, that is a contact detail that you can use. And it's also important for you journalists that you are working on any story that is related to this subject matter to know that our current story contest for the month of November is actually on COP28. Any story related to COP27, climate change, environment stories, and so which means water-related issues are still qualified. If you are publishing any story on this subject, do not hesitate to send them to me to actually enter story contest, which in addition to the cash prize also gives you a certificate of recognition and an acknowledgement from the International Center for Journalists. So please, as you are writing the stories out, as you are reaching out to your audience, engaging the audience, we are more than willing to help you out to write better stories. And we are also more than willing to help you out in driving attention to issues that you've reported. So I want to say, before I leave that topic, I think for people that have already published stories on this issue and that you would like to share with me, I think it's important that I'm trying to get the link. I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. Okay. So you just click that form. It takes you straight to where you submit your stories from for consideration. And so if you would like I said, if you want to reach out to them, there is an email already. But if you really want me to help you out in aggressively getting quick response from them, do not hesitate to reach me directly. And I will gladly do that for you. On behalf of the International Center for Journalists and on behalf of the Pamela Howard Forum on Global Crisis Reporting, I want to thank our guests today, Harry and Sarah, for accepting our invitation and for joining us for their meticulous contribution to the subject, for sharing their expertise and their willingness to be available to our journalists that want to write stories on these issues. So thank you very much for joining us. And if you joined us through any of the, if you are not a member of the ICFJ's Pamela Howard Forum, I would like the easiest way for you to get notified of any resource of insights or tools that we are sharing. It's for you to be part of our forum on Facebook. which is why the link I just put in the chat box takes you to our Facebook page, a group, which is a closed group, but in it you can access resources, information, tools, and insights that would be beneficial for your work as a journalist. And we are also, to learn more about this initiative of the International Center for Journalists, I encourage you to check out the International Center for Journalists website on www.icfj.org. And we also have lots of resources to help you out as a journalist. So what you need to do to access those resources is to check out International Journalist Network's website on www.ignet.org. So on behalf of everybody behind the scene that made this to be a success on our side and on the Africa Water Facility side, I say thank you very much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day, and bye from me.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.